She's so cute, Allura squealed, as Sparty showed them the little bundle on her shoulder. To Jack, it looked like someone had taken a flying squirrel, a bat, and an armadillo, and spliced them together with patches of white fur, large cute eyes, and a thin, expandable membrane that extended from his scaled limbs, allowing it to hop and glide to wherever Sparty pointed, rewarding it with small pieces of fruit. From what Chio told him of familiars, they didn't need sustenance or much training, but it didn't matter to Sparty, who was clearly having fun with Chichika, her new friend she'd summoned into being. "And this is Jack," Sparty whispered encouragingly to the creature, as if it were a child. "Say hello." "Hello, Jack," the tiny creature squeaked, curiously looking up at the human. "Hello," Jack replied with a faint smile, stroking the top of its head. "She's amazing, Sparty," Vanya smiled, as she put an arm around her friend. "Think she'll be able to help us out with the paper?" "I'm sure she can," Sparty replied hesitantly, as the queue the group were in got ever closer to the Prefect checkpoint. "Perhaps if we have the time to help with it." "What's wrong? You're usually keen to get involved." "Shame we can't take Dante to school," Jack spoke up, changing the subject as Sparty seemed reluctant to answer. He would have been helpful against the drow. "We still need to meet him," Vanya beamed, trying to be subtle in putting her other arm around Jack seductively. "When do I next see you guys outside of school? I really wouldn't mind testing out that hot tub of yours." "We haven't got that yet," Sephi quickly replied, taking Jack's other arm a bit too forcefully. "You'll probably see us at the Barton's party." "Not after school? You've got a deathball game, haven't you?" Vanya asked with a sad expression, looking to Jack. "Yep," Nikki grinned. "We'll celebrate our win at the party." "You're that confident, are you?" they heard from another queue to the side. "You're facing me and my team with a squad of 10. "Hey there, Luvia," Allura smiled and waved at the dragon. "They've been training hard this week." "So have we, and I haven't seen you in ages. Oh, hi, Jack!" She enthusiastically waved back upon seeing the human. "I haven't seen you in days. The two of us really need to catch up. You should come watch our game tomorrow." "Will do," Jack called back with his best poker face. Sephi barely stifled her laugh. Their Deathball team had kept their newest team member a secret as best they could, and it seemed that strategy was working wonders. Sparty was first to undergo an inspection by the prefects, who was shaking with nervousness. Chichika was small and quiet, but that didn't stop the Nira from worrying. "And just what are you hiding from me?" the prefect snarled at Sparty. "We've been told to be on the alert for drug pushers this week. Arms against the wall." "That will be unnecessary," a voice snarled from across the room, as Spartle slithered up to the prefect and stared her down, flanked by the drow, Soren and Cravel. The brother eyed the rest of the group challengingly, then smiled to his sister, nodding for her to pass through as he accompanied her away from the scene. "It's that one you want to examine closely," Cravel spoke up with a slimy growl, mockily pointing at Jack. "I recommend a full cavity search." "How's your sister?" Jack taunted back. "You inbreeding pussies managed to fix her face yet?" Cravel growled in anger as black flames appeared in both hands, Jack being quick on the mark and swiftly leveling his dominator at the asshole's head, daring him to try something. "Had I been here, you would be screaming in pain," the drow wizard sneered. "More like sign and boredom," Jack quipped. Soren quickly put an arm around his brother, seeing they were outnumbered by the rest of the group. "You'll get what's coming to you soon, outsider, I guarantee it," he drawled. "Such a shame that Rena put an end to our fight, but no matter. Our new Nira friend was very forthcoming about your capabilities." They were interrupted by a deep-set growl from behind them, as Luvia stepped in close, the dragon girl snarling at them. "Leave them alone." "Fine. He's a dead man walking anyway. Devastation comes for you, Deathworlder," Soren replied with a sickening chuckle, as he and Cravel backed away and got out of sight. Seeing that the prefect at their checkpoint had long fled, leaving behind a small puddle, the rest of the group quickly went through. "So, Spartle's thrown his lot in with the drow," Nika growled. "That makes things much, much worse." "What the hell?" Vanya exclaimed. "That must be why Sparty's been acting so weird. She must have moved out without even telling us. Her father always forbade her from doing a bunch of things, including summoning a familiar." "I always thought we'd get the call to help her leave home at some point," Allura sighed. "I've offered her a room with us any time she needs it, but she's always refused to leave her brother behind." Never understood that, Nika grunted. Piece of shit isn't worth it. Regardless, Spartal must have cut a deal with the Drow to get protection and patronage for him and Svarti, Chia reasoned. And if Soren is believed, he gave them tactical advice on our group. We must be careful. No way is Svarti going to be in a good spot there, Sephi warned. It's the Malcast, for fuck's sake. She seems happy, Vanya warily spoke, but I'll need to speak to her. Jack stayed silent, thinking to himself about what had just happened. Just what were the Drow planning?
Very good, you two.
Mr. Basil, the industrial vocation teacher, praised the pair of Jack and Nika as they showed off the robot they had put together, which had just been awakened with some adaptive software.
Those 8 spindly legs were an interesting design choice considering the small size required, but it seems to have worked well. Which one of you came up with that?
I did, sir, Jack spoke up. There's a creature where I come from that can crawl up walls, and that inspired the idea.
Excellent work, the teacher grinned. You've got movement sorted out, so your homework for the next 2 weeks before our next lesson is to work out what features you want to add to it and do so. Then fully calibrate your bot with the software so it can learn how to properly operate itself. When we next convene, you two can tell us about the bot you've made.
Sounds good, Jack replied, having had genuine fun with Nika rummaging through the different boxes of components and seeing what worked with the standard mother base component they all started with. That was amazing, Nika smiled as they left. Usually I end up with randoms trying to mooch off me, so I'm lucky I have you to work with now. I'm just glad you know what you're doing, Jack laughed. Though, how come it's 2 weeks rather than 1? This alternates with cookery, she grinned, though they mix up the classes again for that. I've checked. I join Alora and Sephi and you're stuck with Chio next week. Art and music alternate too, but I'm pretty sure that's it for you. At least for this school rotation. That makes sense. It's a shame we don't get this again, but cooking won't be too bad as long as I have a recipe to follow. Well, you can get your practice in tonight, Nika snorted as she put a reassuring arm around him. You'll be cooking for all of us. Jack gulped at that. The next lesson was a boring biology class, covering various types of single-celled organisms and their individual molecular makeup. To Jack, it was a bit of a disappointment, as he would have rather learned about the various alien creatures he might meet instead, but perhaps that would happen during a future lesson. Certainly both Sephi and Nika joined him in being bored, so he didn't feel too bad. Luckily, that snooze fest was followed by species and culture, which was actually rather interesting. Learning the basics of 3 prominent alien species Jack had yet to meet, and then being given homework to do a bit more research on all of them. So, remember, I want you to go into detail about their traditional gods, celebrated holidays, and a rundown of their history before meeting the rest of the galaxy, Miss Luxcott called out, as the bell rang and everyone began to pack their bags. At least 800 words per species. At this, the class groaned, as they filed out of the room to go to lunch. That's going to be a pain in the ass on a run weekend, Sephi sighed. Well, if each of us pick a species and share our notes, we could cut down on the time, Jack suggested. Sounds like some sort of a plan, Nika shrugged. Putting it to words will be annoying, though. Best to get it done tonight if we can. It'll suck, but we have a run and a party. I hate to say it, but we should eat quickly and make a start during lunch. Both Jack and Sephi grumbled at that prospect. And so, it is for this reason that when you all finally join the wonderful world of corporate life, it is vitally important that you maintain a good, healthy working relationship with all of your colleagues. And remember that, as we saw in our case study, your manager is your best friend, and can always be trusted to lead your team and have your best interests at heart. Yuck. After an interesting physics lesson that went into detail on celestial bodies, and something that sounded similar to Hubble's law, Jack had hoped that their galactic citizenship lesson would give him some more insight into the various kingdoms, empires, and factions around the galaxy that he hadn't heard about yet. He had asked Laura about it, and while it was apparently on the syllabus, the school's corporate sponsors wanted students to be taught about the various megacorporations they would likely be working for when they were of age. It had Jack thinking dark thoughts. If the worst should happen and he was stuck here forever, what would he even do? Could he move on and live his life as the only human in an alien galaxy? Sit down in some shitty office job every day until he died? Maybe he'd get to fly in a spaceship if he was lucky. Damn, he missed home. He really hoped they'd have better luck with tomorrow's run. Dante greeted them with his usual enthusiasm when they got home, with Nika and Sephi volunteering to walk him, though that was likely just because they wanted to put off the homework they had received that day. Which left Jack to cook a meal for the group. He flicked through the thick, battered cookbook he was given, and stopped at a random page. What the hell was Zilplo sauce? Chio wandered into the living room about half an hour later, having finished the rest of her homework for the evening. All things considered, it had been a rather typical school day, despite the occasional news of a missing student reappearing randomly throughout the day, with little to no memory. Whatever the threat was, it hadn't come for them yet, and it wasn't lethal. They knew Killer Kush had been around the school, but they had no idea just what he was possibly up to. Was he trying to get some information on Jack? Chio was interrupted by Jack seeing something from the kitchen, where he had several pans and pots cooking at the same time. She didn't know what it was, but assumed it was some kind of tradition or ritual from his homeworld. You gotta do the cooking by the book. Chio had no idea how Jack had been able to keep going for this long. Every night he was woken up by Devil's daughter messing with his dreams, and every time he just got up, cracked open an energy drink and began to train. Thanks to her own unusual sleeping schedule, Chio had often joined him, and had seen him pull off some amazing moves with his guns, axe and knives. Never use a messy recipe. Looking at Jack's aura, Chio could see that his underlying emotions were nowhere near his cheery facade. Jack had somehow managed to keep himself together all this time, but the telltale colours of fear and terror were still there, same as the day she met him, only this time much more vivid. Other signs were present as well. The red of anger, the blackness of despair. But just faintly, Chio saw the hint of other signs. There was happiness, a sense of belonging, even hope. If you do the cooking by the book, then you'll have... Break it down, bitch! Let me see you back it up! Chio was snapped out of her thoughts by the sudden change in tune, as Jack quickly checked something in the cookbook and quickly stirred several of the pots, before looking up and seeing the now silent, giggling Alethi. What? Not your thing? He joked, which made Chio laugh harder. Your singing is worse than my cooking, she texted back. Both of them laughed even harder at that. I could always give you a hand next time, Jack reasoned. According to Nika, we share a cookery class next week anyway. What would we even cook? Pancakes would be easy enough, Jack reasoned. My mum and dad drafted me to help them with a few dishes when I was younger, and I did a lot of backwoods cooking whenever I was with the Scouts. I guess the best way to get better would be to start with something simple, get confident at it, then take that knowledge to something similar, but more difficult. You make it sound so simple. And it probably isn't, Jack grinned. Should be fun trying it at least. They paused for an awkward moment before Chio typed something. I would like to merge again tonight, she typed, looking seriously at Jack. We've all agreed we need to get as much sleep as possible before tomorrow, and you've barely been getting any thanks to Devil's daughter. Jack nodded. Sure, we know how it works. But won't you get dragged into it if she attacks again? Chio stopped at that, thinking about something for a moment, before suddenly using her power to gently pick Jack up and hold his limbs, before casually floating over and playfully flicking him on the forehead. Hey! Jack snorted as he was let go, quickly rushing to the pans to stop the food from burning before Chio showed him a message, cheekily sticking her tongue out. You really like that hero complex of yours, don't you? Chio raised her eyebrows, demanding an answer. It's not that, Jack sighed. As Chio's eyebrows grew even higher. I told you guys, it's my mess. I feel guilty letting you get involved, and I don't want you to get hurt. When Alora got into trouble with the Drow, you didn't hesitate to back her up, even when it had nothing to do with you, Chio retorted. When Sephi wanted to rob the Prefect's lockup, you got involved in that stupid idea by asking her about it and joining her when you could have just ignored it. Jack mulled the meaning of that for a moment. All of us get into trouble at some point, Chio typed, quickly working her fingers. But it doesn't matter what it is, when we work together as a group we can overcome it. The spawn of Negdon, Dubaku, the Red Legion aspirants, none of us as individuals could have done what we all did together. So stop making all this transactionary and trust us. We help one another because we're friends, and we always know our friends have our backs. Jack nodded, understanding what the Alethi meant. We've really got to fix this communication issue between us, Jack grinned. I could always do with some words of wisdom. I absolutely agree, Chio grinned. You still owe me a date. Their dinner that night could have been worse. Svartal, my dearest son, I hope this quick letter never has to reach you. If it does, it means that I am most likely dead, and that my sending spell will ensure you somehow receive this wherever you are by the winds of fate. At the time of writing this, my companions and I prepare for the final assault against Azazel, Lord of Torment, and we don't have much time. It will be a difficult, bloody battle, but it is our hope that we can pierce into the heart of the planet, destroy the demon core and end this war, freeing all those that are suffering under his rule. I have left you in Sparty with your uncle Svarjul and his squadmates, just until your grandparents get there and pick you up. I know it isn't ideal, but our forces have no choice but to seize this opening. If I don't make it back, your grandparents and all the rest of the family will do their best to look after you and show you all my letters I have left with them for you. I am so proud of you. I know you will grow up to do great things. Take care of your little sister, and know that I will always love you. Your mother, Svarvali. Pocketing the letter once again, Spartal let out a heavy breath as he sat down in the centre of the room he and Sparty had claimed as their ritual chamber, having made all the needed preparations for what he was trying to accomplish. He knew Sparty would not approve of his extra steps, and so had waited until she left school with her friend Vanya for a few hours, to ensure he would not be disturbed. He had observed Sparty using a scale she had acquired to give a physical form and sentience to an appropriate spirit, and was glad nothing went wrong. Sparty had cast the basic form of the ritual, just happy to get a companion she could talk to as it scuttled and jumped around their apartment in the first few hours, before it finally ran out of energy and was just happy to be petted. But Spartal wanted something more complex. Far more complex, and far more powerful. In theory, there was no limit to the amount of focusing layers one could add to such a complex casting, simply limited by reagents and magical power, but with greater powers came a greater will required to tame and shape the much rarer kinds of chosen spirit. Many an overconfident mage had perished in the attempt at such rituals, but Sparta knew his limits perfectly, and intended to push on the very edge of them. A quick word of power ignited the black candles of rare wax he had purchased, and meticulously placed between and around the sigils he had drawn on the ground, initiating the casting. Relaxing in his coils, he pushed all unwanted sensations away from his mind as he focused on the catalyst in front of him. A single reddish-black feather on top of a small hill of obsidian pebbles. Forcing his thoughts into picturing his desired form, he felt the ritual commence fully, and he closed his eyes as he murmured the activation stance. Expanding his magical senses, Spartle opened his astral third eye, and found himself floating in a sea of swirling shapes and colours. Looking around, he could see several orbs of many shades rise up from the infinite ocean. Spirits all, some large and some small. He began to call to his vision, and allowed the slow ocean currents to take him to where he needed to be. Several of the orbs floated to him, begging him to take them, but he refused them all. Too weak, too naive. He didn't know how long he floated in the astral, deep in his meditations. Time in this realm flowed differently to that of reality, but Spartle did not allow his mind to wander. Whimsical thoughts were dangerous in a place like this, where the horrors of the unprepared mind could be made manifest to wreak havoc on the one that thought them. Fortunately, Spartle had always kept a sharp mind. Eventually, he found himself face to face with what he was looking for, a perfect spiritual match. Rather than skip along the astral waves or beg, the dark grey orb simply waited as Spartle examined it, and the Nira knew he was being examined back. Suddenly, the form warped and shifted quicker than the eye could see, with the occasional spark of red or black within the writhing mass. A sliver of doubt permeated Spartle's mind on seeing that. He had never heard of a spirit acting like that before. It was then the battle of wills began. Spartle could feel a presence push on his mind as if searching for a weakness, quickly reaching around and methodically chipping away at his mental walls. It was a classic test of worthiness for a mage, to tame a spirit and exert one's will. Most weaker spirits didn't bother, happy as they were to accept any master that wanted them, but stronger ones had the instinct to resist, like an animal fighting off a predator. And this one was strange. And powerful. Rather than the panic clawing and hammering at his mind, this one was smarter, taking root into his self-doubt and insecurities and trying to force them wide. Spartawl had never heard of a spirit do this before, but he recognized it for the test it was, and lashed out in an attack of his own, taking all of his anger and lashing right back at the spirit, forcing it back. It didn't attack again, perceiving Spartawl in greater detail as the mirror did the same to it. Unusually, there wasn't another attack. Spartawl felt a sensation of eager agreement from the spirit, a soon-to-be soul to be given form. Expecting a trick, Spartawl extended his astral sense once more. The moment he touched the spirit, he felt the connection, a bond of souls working in harmony, as the contract was formed. Spartawl muttered more words in his physical form to begin the next phase of the ritual. Now the binding was complete, his familiar needed a physical form of his own. From an animalistic spirit, Spartawl would awaken it into a true soul, and will it into sentience. Hearing the physical creation on the material plane at the edge of his senses, Spartawl pictured what he wanted in his mind, using much of his remaining magical power to shape the spirit's form like clay. And the spirit was pleased. As the ritual came to an end, Spartawl opened his eyes. In front of him stood a large bird-like creature, about a meter tall with obsidian feathers black as night, with a rent tint like burning embers, thick, powerful wings of perfect muscle, and honed, sharp talons of dark steel. With a serrated beak of razor teeth, it spoke. "I ask of you," it spoke calmly, looking at Spartawl with intelligent, black, calculating eyes. "Are you my master?"